What if I told you that the front line of the global tech war isn't in a Silicon Valley boardroom or even the Pentagon?
Right, it's actually happening in places you would probably never expect.
Yeah, exactly. What if the most critical battles are actually taking place in sleepy Tuesday night village board meetings in like rural Wisconsin or suburban Maryland?
It's wild to think about.
I mean, you picture a local city council zoning meeting, and you probably imagine a debate over a new stop sign or, a dispute about a neighbor's fence.
Yeah, like local noise complaints.
Right. It's hyper-local, and the stakes rarely extend past the neighborhood watch. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a really fascinating, highly unexpected battleground. We're looking at local campaigns against American AI data centers.
It really shifts your perspective on what modern conflict actually looks like. We are looking at how hyperlocal civic life can intersect with macro-level global strategy.
We've got a massive stack of research here, but our main mission today is to untack a June 2026 report by the Bitcoin Policy Institute, or BPI. The report is titled Foreign Influence in the Campaign Against American AI, Part 2, The Singham Ground Game. But before we jump in, a quick but crucial note for you listening. The source material we are unpacking today dives into highly charged political territory, referencing left-wing Marxist organizations, right-wing congressional inquiries, and U.S.-China geopolitical tensions. We are absolutely not taking sides here, nor are we endorsing the viewpoints or claims of the content. We are simply acting as your impartial guides, reporting the ideas contained in the original source material so you can understand the debate.
Right, it is entirely about synthesis today.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the architecture of an argument that BPI has laid out meticulously.
So let's set the scene with the core tension here. The report revolves around artificial intelligence infrastructure, specifically the massive data centers required to run AI.
And these things are huge.
Oh, massive. And across America, citizens have genuine, completely authentic concerns about these new facilities. Like, if you live near one of these proposed sites, you are probably worried about local water resources being drained to cool the servers, the immense strain on the local power grid, and the real possibility of your electricity bill just skyrocketing.
Yeah, and the BPI report establishes that baseline reality right up front. They're not claiming that local opposition is entirely manufactured or fake.
Right.
In fact, they cite research from Edelman showing that only 17% of Americans actually want to embrace AI, and a massive 71% would oppose a data center in their own area. So the friction is totally authentic. People have a democratic right to be concerned about their backyards.
So if the anger is real, what is the BPI report actually alleging here?
Well, it's about what happens to that anger.
Okay, let's try to visualize the mechanics of this. Imagine you have a genuine grassroots neighborhood dispute over, like, a noisy street lamp.
Okay, a street lamp.
Yeah. People in the cul-de-sac are annoyed, they're grumbling, maybe they write a handwritten letter to the mayor. But suddenly, an international PR firm steps in.
Right.
They print professional glossy signs, hire a legal team, and they bus in seasoned activists from 3 towns over to pack the city council meeting. They basically take a localized frustration and weaponize it to make absolutely sure that street lamp never gets built.
That is exactly the central thesis BPI is putting forward.
Right.
The report alleges there is a parallel foreign influence campaign working to slide right into the slipstream of that authentic local anger.
Okay.
The ultimate goal isn't just to help a few suburban residents with their noise complaints. The alleged goal is to intentionally amplify that public division, to stall or block American AI infrastructure on a national scale.
Wow.
Yeah, and BPI places one specific individual at the center of this network, Neville Roy Singham.
And his background is, frankly, something out of a geopolitical thriller.
It really is.
Singham is an American citizen. He built a massive tech consultancy called ThoughtWorks, which he eventually sold for a reported $785 million.
A huge payout.
Yeah. But he doesn't live in Silicon Valley anymore.
No, he lives in Shanghai now. And he publicly identifies as a Marxist. And according to a major New York Times investigation that BPI relies on heavily in this report, Singham allegedly shares an office space in Shanghai with a Chinese media firm called the Maku Group.
And the Maku Group's stated mission isn't just, standard media production, right? The phrase they use is to tell China's story well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that specific phrase is widely recognized by geopolitical analysts as the central mandate for the overseas propaganda efforts of the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the BPI report also notes that visitors to Singham's office have literally seen a banner reading, "Always follow the party."
Okay, that's pretty direct.
Right. And because of these connections and the massive funding networks he allegedly controls, he is currently the subject of multiple congressional inquiries regarding his ties to the CCP.
But hold on, we have to bridge a pretty massive gap here. You have a centimillionaire tech mogul sitting in an office in Shanghai. How does he actually move the needle in a town hall in Wisconsin?
That's the big question, yeah.
I mean, he's not flying in to hand out flyers. There has to be a mechanism on the ground.
You're touching on the core of the report. BPI points the finger directly at the political arm of this operation, which is an organization called the Party for Socialism and Liberation, or the PSL.
Okay, let's unpack who they are, because this isn't just like a standard environmental nonprofit.
Oh, far from it. The PSL is an explicitly Marxist-Leninist political organization operating in the U.S.
Right.
Their stated public platform is not about reforming the tax code or passing environmental regulations. It is about abolishing American capitalism entirely.
So, pretty radical.
Very. They explicitly state this will require a revolution, not just an election. And fundamentally, their worldview is internationalist. They view the American working class as just one piece of a global proletariat, meaning their ideological loyalty isn't tethered to the American nation-state.
Okay, I understand the ideology, but how does BPI prove that the PSL is acting as the ground game for a guy in Shanghai? I mean, are they just ideologically aligned, or is there a hard link?
What's fascinating here is the link BPI tracks through the sheer density of leadership overlap.
What do you mean?
Well, they followed the executives who run Singham-funded nonprofits and found they are, in many cases, the exact same individuals running the PSL. Take Claudia de la Cruz, for example.
Okay.
She co-founded a Singham-linked organization called the People's Forum. She was also the PSL's 2024 presidential nominee.
Wait, so the presidential candidate for the party is also running the nonprofit connected to Shanghai?
Yes, exactly. And it continues. Her running mate on that presidential ticket, Karina Garcia, directs a Singham-linked grant organization called the Justice and Education Fund.
Wow, okay.
Then you have figures like Eugene Puryear and Ben Becker, who run a Singham-funded media outlet called Breakthrough News. Both of those men sit on the PSL's Central Committee. So BPI is illustrating a very tight, highly coordinated circle where the people managing the nonprofit money are literally the Central Committee of the political party.
Let me stop you there because something just isn't adding up regarding the money.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Well, if this is a political party operating in the U.S. and they run candidates for president, shouldn't their funding be totally public? We have strict laws about this. How do we not know exactly who is paying for this advocacy?
You would assume that, absolutely.
Yeah.
But this is where BPI outlines a massive structural gap in U.S. election and tax law.
Oh, a loophole.
Exactly. When the PSL runs a candidate for federal office, like Claudia de la Cruz, they absolutely have to report those campaign donations to the Federal Election Commission. That specific bucket of money is public. But the PSL doesn't just run candidates. They do year-round issue advocacy. And the structure they use for that general operating money is the loophole.
Explain how that loophole works mechanically, because if they are an advocacy group, don't they have to file a Form 990 like every other nonprofit?
No, because they don't operate as a traditional 501c3 or even a standard 501c4 in the way most advocacy groups do.
Really?
Yeah. When you go to the PSL website to donate to their general fund, it explicitly says donations are not tax deductible. By structuring themselves this way, they operate outside the standard disclosure requirements of tax-exempt charities, while also keeping that money separate from their strictly electoral, FEC-regulated campaign fund.
It's like a one-way mirror in an interrogation room.
Oh, that's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah, like if you look at the election side, the presidential campaign, like the glass is completely transparent. You see the donors, but you slide over to the year-round advocacy side, the side buying the protest signs and renting the buses.
And suddenly it's a mirror.
Right. The public just sees a reflection of grassroots activism, while whoever is standing in the dark on the other side can funnel in whatever they want, completely unseen.
That analogy hits it perfectly. Because they don't file a public Form 990 for that operating money, it cannot be tested against any public donor record. BPI argues this structural opacity creates a massive vulnerability for foreign influence, especially given the leadership's documented ties to Singham's international network.
Which brings us to the actual scale of what they are accomplishing on the other side of that mirror. I mean, this isn't just a few localized Facebook groups complaining. BPI tracked 21 separate PSL campaigns across 14 different states.
That is a massive footprint.
Right. This is a highly disciplined, synchronized ground game.
And we really have to look at the material impact here. The numbers BPI calculated are staggering. This organizing has contributed to 10 local data center moratoria, meaning local governments, placed a hard pause on building plus 1 permanent ban and 4 entirely scrapped projects. When you add up the disclosed value of those delayed or blocked facilities, you are looking at least $23.6 billion in proposed AI investment that has been effectively halted.
That is $23.6 billion pulled out of the infrastructure pipeline. I mean, it impacts supply chains, local tax revenues, and national AI capacity. Let's bring this to life by looking at the specific case studies BPI highlights, because it really shows you the mechanics of how this works on a local level. Let's start with Prince George's County in Maryland.
Okay, yeah. This was a proposed $5 billion data center project meant to replace a former mall site. According to the BPI reporting, the PSL's local chapter didn't just show up on the day of the vote with some signs.
Right.
They executed a masterclass in local agitation over months. They used public libraries to hold workshops, explicitly coaching residents on how to effectively door knock and control a narrative. They organized a petition that gathered over 20,000 signatures.
And the climax of this was the county task force meeting. BPI describes the scene where attendees packed the auditorium, overflowing out into the hallways. And the PSL organizers were right in the middle, leading chants of, "Hey, hey, ho, ho, these data centers have got to go."
The classics.
Yeah. But the optics were so overwhelming that the county executive ultimately paused the permits.
Because the pressure works. It leverages the inherent caution of local politicians. And we saw an even more dramatic version of this in DeForest, Wisconsin.
Oh, this one is crazy.
Yeah, this was a proposed $12 billion project by a company called QTS. But this wasn't just a standard server farm. This was a proposed hyperscale campus.
Let's define that for a second, because hyperscale is a buzzword that gets thrown around, but it has real implications for why a town might be terrified of it.
Absolutely. A standard data center might be, a large warehouse. A hyperscale campus is a sprawling, interconnected complex, sometimes spanning millions of square feet and housing hundreds of thousands of servers.
It's basically a small city.
Pretty much. And the energy draw is immense. We are talking hundreds of megawatts, sometimes approaching a gigawatt. That is the equivalent power draw of tens of thousands of homes. They also require massive amounts of water for the cooling infrastructure.
Right.
So when a developer says they want to build a hyperscale campus in your village, the fear of the grid going dark or water reservoirs being depleted is extremely potent.
Which makes it incredibly easy for an outside group to step in and light a match. In Wisconsin, the PSL pushed a statewide slogan that BPI highlights, which is, "America's Dairyland, not America's Data Land."
It's so catchy.
I have to admit, that is brilliant branding. If you're a resident worried about your electric bill, you latch right onto that. It doesn't sound like a Marxist revolution at all. It sounds like local pride.
That is exactly why the strategy is so potent. They take hyper-local, relatable messaging and inject professional organizing muscle behind it. The residents provide the authentic face of the movement, while the PSL provides the structural spine. The village board meeting in DeForest overflowed with over 250 people.
Unbelievable.
The political pressure became insurmountable. The village declared the project not feasible, and a $12 billion investment evaporated.
And they achieved the ultimate expression of this playbook in Monterey Park, California.
Yeah.
A coalition that prominently included the PSL didn't just secure a temporary pause. They got an outright permanent ban on data centers in the city limits. And it passed with 86% of the vote.
And once a permanent ban is codified, that territory is completely off the map for American infrastructure development.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me. I'm trying to understand the motive.
Okay.
If I am an organizer for a Marxist-Leninist workers' party, and my stated ultimate goal is the total overthrow of global capitalism, why am I spending my Tuesday nights fighting zoning laws for AI servers in suburban Wisconsin? It just feels so disconnected from the ideology.
That is the most important question BPI attempts to answer. To explain the motive, the report introduces a concept called campism. What's interesting is that this isn't a critique coming from right-wing politicians. This is a critique lobbed at the PSL by fellow socialist and left-wing organizations.
Wait, really? Their own ideological peers are calling them out?
Yes. Critics accuse the PSL of operating under a framework where they reflexively support almost any authoritarian regime in the world, whether it's China, Russia, or Syria, so long as that regime opposes the United States.
Okay.
It's the idea of splitting the globe into two camps, and always, without fail, siding with the anti-American camp. BPI quotes a socialist newspaper called Left Voice, which heavily criticized the PSL's coverage of China, stating that it reads, quote, like a Chinese government PR agency.
Wow.
Yeah. Another left-wing group famously referred to this approach as the anti-imperialism of fools.
So the implication BPI is making is that their on-the-ground activism in America aligns perfectly with the geopolitical goals of America's adversaries.
Precisely. And to truly understand why a zoning meeting matters to global superpowers, BPI references a fascinating 1999 book written by two colonels in the Chinese People's Liberation Army. The book is titled Unrestricted Warfare.
Oh, I've heard this title referenced in military strategy circles before. It's basically the foundational manual for modern asymmetric conflict. But wait, this book was written in 1999.
Right.
That's before AI was really a reality, before social media even existed. How does a 1999 military text predict a zoning fight in 2026?
Because the book isn't really about specific technologies, it's about identifying the fundamental vulnerabilities of open democratic systems. The core thesis of unrestricted warfare is that future conflicts between superpowers will not be fought primarily with missiles, tanks, or traditional troops.
The battlefield has changed.
Exactly, it's expanded. Future wars will be fought through international finance, through exploiting legal systems, through manipulating media, and crucially, through weaponizing local public opinion. The doctrine argues that you can weaken an adversary from the inside out by using their own democratic processes against them.
So under that strategic framework, a town hall in Maryland isn't just a mundane civic meeting. It is literally a strategic choke point.
Exactly.
If you can convince 250 local citizens to block a permit, you have successfully denied your adversary a critical piece of national infrastructure without ever firing a single shot.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact mechanism, and it explains why data centers are the target. America's AI build-out is not just a localized debate over whether a tech company gets to build a new server farm. It is a strategic global contest over compute power, energy capacity, and national security in the 21st century.
Yeah.
The nation that successfully builds the infrastructure to power advanced AI will likely dictate the technological, economic, and military terms of the next several decades. Slowing down that build-out in the U.S. directly benefits competitors abroad.
So what does this all mean? We've covered incredible ground today, from Shanghai boardrooms to Wisconsin village halls, and from Marxist-Leninist ideology to Chinese military doctrine. And synthesizing all of this leaves us with a really profound dilemma regarding how open societies function.
It really does.
On one hand, Americans have a fundamental democratic right to oppose massive, power-hungry data centers being built in their backyards. They have a right to worry about their water and their power bills. That is exactly how a free society is supposed to work.
It is the bedrock of civic engagement.
But on the other hand, a free society absolutely relies on transparency to function properly. The BPI report argues that when a foreign-aligned network, utilizing opaque funding structures, intentionally exploits those authentic local concerns to stall critical national infrastructure, it creates a dual threat.
It does. First, it distorts local democracy because the residents themselves have no idea who is actually holding the megaphone or funding the lawyers. They think they're fighting a local fight, totally unaware of the global strategy at play. And second, it threatens long-term national competitiveness by grinding essential infrastructure to a halt.
It brings us right back to the one-way mirror analogy. If you're angry about the project, you absolutely have a right to be heard at that town hall. But you also have a right to know if the organization handing you a protest sign and coaching you on what to say is secretly being supported by someone whose ultimate goal is to keep your entire country in the dark.
And that leads to a deeply important question for us to consider as we move forward. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about AI data centers, because that is the current flashpoint. But AI is just today's technology.
Right. The infrastructure needs of the country are only going to grow.
Think about what comes next. If foreign adversaries, or their ideological proxies, can so seamlessly slip into the slipstream of local zoning disputes to block AI, what happens when the next wave of critical infrastructure needs to be built? I'm talking about next-generation energy grids, or advanced quantum computing labs, or the domestic semiconductor manufacturing facilities we desperately need.
Yeah, that's a huge issue.
If the playbook of utilizing opaque funding loopholes and hyperlocal grievances remains this effective, how will we ever be able to distinguish between genuine grassroots American concern and strategically amplified astroturfing.
It's a chilling thought. I mean, how do you separate the real concerned neighbors from the phantom PR firm operating behind the mirror? It's a complex problem with no easy answers, but understanding the mechanics of how it works is the first step. That's all the time we have for this deep dive into the BPI report. Thank you for joining us today. Keep asking the hard questions, looking for the underlying mechanisms, and paying attention, especially when the debate happens right in your own backyard.